There have been many slave revolts in history, but none as successful as the Haitian Revolution, which was so successful the former slaves got their own country. Now let's get right into it. Saint Domingue, now Haiti, was a slave colony owned by France. They specialized in cash crops like sugar and coffee, both pretty labor-intensive crops, especially without modern technology. In order to maximize their profits on these plantations and not have to work themselves, plantation owners imported a ton of slaves. So by 1791, at the start of the Haitian Revolution, there were 8,000 plantations, about 500,000 slaves, 30,000 affranchis, or free people of color, and only 40,000 whites, which looks something like this. In 1789, France had just wrapped up their own revolution built on the ideas of the Enlightenment, and they had created a document called the Declaration of the Rights of Man. But there was still argument over whether or not that was exclusive to white people. Saint Domingue heard about this declaration and picked up their own stances on the matter, mainly divided by their social class. In 1790, France decided that all free people in colonies should be able to form a local government, to the surprise of some very excited local abolitionist groups, who were then very disappointed when France got lazy and didn't enforce this new law. One abolitionist in particular, Vincent Oge, was so mad he raised an army of people of color in his hometown. Enforce the new law, or I will fight you. Yeah? You and what army? Vincent Oge was executed later that year, and of course the people of Saint Domingue heard about it. So did you hear how the affranchis are now citizens, but we're still slaves? Yeah, and there's the whole thing with Vincent Oge earlier this year. It's not fair, let's do something about it. Bois Caiman. Bois Caiman was a voodoo service held in Bois Caiman, led by Duty Bookman, and is credited as the inciting incident of the Haitian Revolution. Bois Caiman is where the slaves organized their plans for the first stage of the revolution. We first have to understand what voodoo is and its significance to slave populations. Voodoo is made with several African religions and a little bit of French Catholicism all mixed together into its own distinct religion. This was a way for slaves imported from Africa and torn from their heritage and community to connect with each other and build a new sense of community and identity to rally around. The French slave owners on the island attempted to prevent voodoo services, as they recognized the danger of thousands of horribly mistreated people, treated as less than human, meeting together around something as motivating as religion, especially in a time when they should by all means be getting some basic human rights, and are pretty angry that they haven't yet. However, seeing as how the slaves were the clear majority and fully capable of sneaking away for a few hours a night, they couldn't really do anything about it. The plantation owners' fears came true when soon after the events of Bois Caiman, the slaves revolted, burning about 1,000 plantations and killing hundreds of white and mixed-race people who owned and lived on the plantations. Hey guys, maybe we should start talking about freeing the slaves. Hey, I'm Southanox. Come fight for us and we'll give you citizenship and freedom. Can I fight the plantation owners? Yes. They were so successful, France abolished slavery the next year in 1794. Toussaint Louverture. Toussaint Louverture was an especially big figure in the Haitian Revolution. He was born a slave, but well-educated and managed to social climb all the way to the wealthy affranchis. In 1793, when Louverture and other commanders joined the Spanish or British respectively, Toussaint joined the Spanish. His time with the Spanish was immensely successful. He trained a large army in guerrilla warfare and held control over a huge mass of land, which is why it was so tragic for the Spanish when he joined the French in 1794 after they abolished slavery. By 1795, Louverture was a renowned leader. He brought back a few plantation owners to get the sugar and coffee business started back up and revive the local economy under the condition that they provide good working conditions, and he continued to fight the British in the name of France. That is, until he made a secret treaty with Britain separate from the rest of France. However, his reign wasn't all smooth sailing. He ended up forcing Southonox, our old friend who freed the slaves, off the island, and as a result ticked off all of France. He had to take care of a few French officials trying to push Saint Domingue into civil war. Additionally, some of the more extreme abolitionists led a few uprisings because they wanted to chase off or kill all the Europeans on the island. Overall, though, Toussaint had a relatively peaceful reign, at least until Napoleon came into power. Napoleon saw Toussaint as a threat, and Toussaint's actions didn't necessarily discourage that. I am Toussaint. I have just conquered Saint Domingo, and I am now Governor General for life. Here is your new constitution. Sir, this says Catholicism is the new state religion and Voodoo is banned. That's right. While Toussaint's constitution outlawed racism, its religious intolerance and nature of absolute power was met with a lot of resistance and also threatened France, specifically Napoleon, who was racist and wanted to reinstitute slavery. The next year, Napoleon sent his brother-in-law and the leader of France's best army, Charles Leclerc, to recapture Saint-Domingue and reinstate slavery with a 3-step plan. The 3 steps being gain trust, war, slavery. Leclerc's fight against Saint-Domingue was surprisingly brutal for Napoleon and Leclerc because they underestimated Toussaint's armies, and for Toussaint because he didn't expect all his troops to defect. So, hey, I know that you don't really like Toussaint that much anymore since, the whole banning Voodoo thing. So why don't you just join me? Yeah, sure. Hey, we're doing pretty well here, huh? One foe who Napoleon and Leclerc definitely did not expect was the mosquito, specifically the Aedes aegypti, most famous at the time for its spread of yellow fever. As the mosquito was native to Africa, everyone who came from Africa had biological immunity to its diseases and only suffered from cold symptoms when bitten. However, Europeans faced the much more deadly and gruesome yellow fever. Even if Toussaint weren't a great military leader, Leclerc would still have to constantly send for more men from France due to deaths caused by yellow fever. At one point, Leclerc's troops were dying at a rate of 30 to 50 a day from yellow fever. Prominent figures at this point in Saint-Domingue were Toussaint and Dessalines. Okay, I'll retire. Just promise you won't do slavery. Promise. And so slavery was reinstated. And Dessalines started trying to unite black forces for another revolution. Meanwhile, Leclerc trapped Toussaint and sent him to die in a prison cell. When I die, I wish to be replaced by Rochambeau. And we're now moving on. Comte De Roshambo. Rochambeau, yes, the same Rochambeau who helped fight in the American Revolution, was requested to replace Leclerc for a reason. He was a slave owner, notorious for the atrocities he committed. He treated people of color as wild beasts, even once bringing in bloodhounds to hunt them down in the mountains of Cuba. But even Rochambeau and his merciless tactics were not enough to achieve a French victory against the ever-strong, now organized Haitian armies, especially not with most of his troops dying to yellow fever and lack of food. The death of Toussaint barely harms the efforts of Dessalines and the other local leaders. By this point, most revolutionary leaders have defected from the French and formed their own all-black armies to fight them. By April of 1803, Napoleon was forced to sell Louisiana, marking the point where Napoleon's western conquests were doomed to fail, and he began to focus on the east. By November, Rochambeau surrendered and his troops returned to France. France had lost a prosperous island and 50,000 men in 2 years, all in the name of slavery, and still Haiti came out on top, inspiring slaves in other Latin American countries and even the U.S. to revolt. General Dessalines, it has been nearly a year since you led us in our defeat of the French in 1803, and we would like to crown you Emperor of Haiti. Wah! After the revolution, Haiti was immediately plunged into political and economic chaos, only furthered by France's independence debt in 1825. Throughout their history, they received minimal, if any, aid from external forces who constantly demonized and looked down on them for reasons of racism. In more recent history, Haiti suffers from epidemics and poor medical services, food insecurity, natural disasters such as hurricanes, earthquakes, and periodic drought, and corrupt leaders. Haiti has, since the revolution, suffered the burden of racism from other countries, which, along with the fact that they had little foundation for a thriving political or economic environment, has led to their continued political chaos and poverty.
3, 2, 1. How does an unfortunate mortal son of God and a Haitian, dropped in the middle of the negotiation in the transatlantic as a merchandise, revolutionized, deinstitutionized, grew up to be a leader, not a follower. The Haitian father provided aid without falter, brought the Spanish farther, training a lot harder by being the French deserter, by being a French returner. By 59, Napoleon placed him in a coffin, and every day while Toussaint rotted away, Haiti struggled unassisted, but still resisted. Across the ocean, Napoleon sold Lady Louisiana. Inside, Haiti didn't long for a return to former ways. Today, the island is ready to accept existence, yet to come into existence.